was just reading your book.
I'm actually in the process of rewriting it. The publisher wants to reissue it under their Adventure Guide series. So we are changing 20% of the plants and changing all the recipes to campfire cooking type stuff for backpackers and that sort of thing. So pretty excited.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for you guys watching at home, forgot about you, sorry. Welcome to Chef Grace's place. Today we have Mark Merriweather, who is a forager, and that is something I have always been interested in. My boyfriend's always yelling at me because I'll be like, hey, that's onion grass. And I'll just start eating it. He's like, stop just putting random plants in your mouth. So I figured I should probably start reading up on foraging so I don't accidentally poison myself.
Always a good plan, yeah. It's a little harder than you might think, though, to poison yourself. So
that's good to hear. Yeah. I always think of that one scene in it was a book, but it was...
Okay, hold it. Stop. If you're going to say Into the Wild by John...
Yes!
Okay, can we talk about that book for a second?
I read the book so long ago that I barely remember it.
The author was wrong. If you talk to any foraging instructor, they are pissed at that author for spreading what we believe to be our lies about the plant. All the signs that Supertramp...
What plant was it?
It was wild pea, I think. I can't remember the exact one off the top of my head. But yeah. The more he pushed John Krakauer, the author, into a corner, the more he pulls out these obscure references from World War II starvation studies by Germans on the Jewish prisoners and all this stuff, and saying there was this one case where this happened. Yeah, no. The guy died of starvation because he didn't know what to eat, and what he did have, he didn't know how to preserve and save. So
because I definitely remember the movie part vividly, and to me, I had kind of one of those moments where everybody's yelling at the person in the Rose from the Titanic for not moving over. If you got found by hikers, obviously as soon as you don't feel good, let's start, and you figured out, he read the book, he's like, I've been poisoned, and then he just didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. In fact, in the movie, the wild edible plant book that they show him having, if you get a copy of that section where he's reading about the plants does not exist in that book. That is a author and Hollywood fiction. Now, before we go much farther on this, I should say that if you are going to accidentally poison yourself in the wild, some sort of pea or bean is probably the most likely culprit, because to that plant, you are basically a big piece of fertilizer at once there. And so they generally do have some toxicity, but the toxicity isn't in the manner of which described in that book about it blocking the ability to harness other food that you're eating, the nutrients and all that. No. The Supertramp, the guy in the book, he died of starvation because he did not prepare himself for the adventure he put himself into. Okay, we can go into happier subjects now. It comes up every time. And there's some really good essays by Sam Thayer, another really well-known forager, pointing out all the things wrong in that book about that section about the thing. Yeah, so it's almost like a running gag with us. It's just, yeah. Anyway.
That's so funny.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, but yeah, I just saw where this was going. It's let's stop that one. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so I learned something, and it's very entertaining learning the answer. So how did you get into foraging?
So actually my earliest memories of this, both my parents are children of the Great Depression. And one of the ways, the small farming communities, I'm from up in central Minnesota originally. And one of the ways the farming communities got through that time was the knowledge of edible plants was still very high. Edible and medicinal plants was still common knowledge. And growing up, my parents, like I said, they're big into the woods. My dad is 87 now, and every day he's still out there tromping around, looking at things and bonding with nature. He figures he'll end there someday. But yeah, it was just part of growing up. The wild foods around us, my parents were, teaching us that. The whole professional side of teaching actually came about when I moved to Texas. I started up a blog on where to go hiking and backpacking and kayaking and things like that. But the posts that really got interest are when I mentioned the wild edible plants I was finding, the medicinal plants I was harvesting, and that just kind of exploded, and here we are today. Short synopsis. So,
I mean, you feel free to go into details as well.
well, in fact, it had been like a side gig for me. My education is actually I have a PhD in chemistry. My plan was to go into medicinal chemistry. So I have a master's in medicinal chemistry and a PhD in physical organic chemistry. So not making the molecules, but figuring out which molecules you need to do a particular job.
So, what medical chemistry, how
medicinal.
is that different than pharmaceuticals? Is that?
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, okay. I'm more at the designing of molecules. It's in pharmaceutical. It's the same thing. Okay. For all intents and pharmaceutical. At the school I went to, Rensselaer Polytech, they called it medicinal chemistry. So, but I got sidetracked for 18 years into the oil industry, where I used my knowledge of plant chemistry and the compounds found in plants to develop environmentally friendly replacements for traditionally less friendly oil field chemicals. My first patent was actually using cinnamon as a corrosion inhibitor for oil field equipment for very environmentally sensitive areas like the North Sea. And for a while, it was the only corrosion inhibitor that was allowed there, which was pretty cool.
Cinnamon?
Yeah, cinnamon.
What kind of cinnamon?
Cinnamon, the electronic structure of cinnamon, the cinnamon aldehyde is really cool, and it blends perfectly with the electronic structure of steel. And so combined onto the electronic hotspots, or the high density electron areas where corrosion starts, the seed points of the corrosion. So cinnamon will glow and glom onto it and then protect that area. So give me a blackboard and we can go into it.
How would you even think let me try cinnamon?
Okay, so you think in molecules, and so you look at what the oil field had been using traditionally, the molecules they used, looking at them from not so much where the atoms are, but where the electron cloud around it is, because that's what matters. And then you assign, or you look at the problem you're trying to solve. What does it need? And then I go through the database of natural products and look for the things that would likely have that complementary isoelectronic structure. It's a piece of cake. You just have to think fuzzy and green and a long time. But anyway.
And a long time. I mean, it's probably something that...
When you think about it, nature has already solved a lot of engineering feats. Just to go to the end of my oil field career, the last series of patents I did was for coating sand with basically a synthetic oyster shell to prevent the dust that comes off it from causing silicosis in people. So it was a spray-on stuff you would mix while you were mining the sand. It would coat it and prevent the sand from being dusty. And it was just basically just a biomimetic, let's say, of oyster shell that would self-assemble on the surface of the sand. That was a fun project. You can do a lot with that. So you can also use it to glue sand together, which is really neat, because then you can take little pieces of sand and stick them together in whatever shape you want and hold it in that place. So
yeah, you could just not tell anyone about that. And
no, it's out there. The patents are out there. If you look up Vorderbrücken patents,
you could go build the most epic sandcastle and the craziest sandcastle.
It was fun because I was working with NASA for a while in the moon tunnels, And they're looking at, could they use this technology to seal the tunnels to make them airtight?
Did you say moon tunnels?
Moon tunnel, yeah. So NASA, they want to have a moon base.
Okay.
And to do that, they were looking at, basically tunneling through the moon rather than building things on the surface, because you got a lot of like solar radiation and bad things hitting the surface of the moon. So it's better to be under the surface of the moon. So they wanted just to like drill tunnels in there. And then to make it airtight, they would have to seal the tunnels. And so they were wondering if this technology, this artificial oyster shell, could seal it tightly enough. And unfortunately not, because do you want to hear this? I mean, when you have a bunch of sand, okay, imagine a bunch of oranges. Let's talk food first. A bunch of oranges stacked together. There's space between the oranges, right? So things, because the oranges don't fit flat together. They're together. So this solution, it will flow in there, but as it starts to solidify, it blocks further flow of the fluid in, but the blockage isn't small enough to prevent gases, because it takes a smaller, you can pass gas through a smaller hole, so you can never get it sealed. So you can never get it sealed up tight enough with this method to make it airtight. So they're gonna have to look at like epoxy coating or some other expensive shipment of chemicals up to the moon to smear on the walls. So I was bummed that didn't work, but so be it.
I mean, there might be another cinnamon out there that you don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm still dabbling. Still dabbling.
Do you do a lot of this thinking when you go foraging?
Yes, a lot of time out in the woods, out in the wild, just autopilot, hands and eyes, brain elsewhere. So yeah, after you do something long enough, it just becomes second nature. No pun intended. So it's away you go. But so I'm no longer in the oil industry, because then I was finally able to go back to the medicine and the plants and started up the Medicine Man Plant Co. So bringing ancient plants for modern issues.
The brain stuff.
Yeah, so this is lion's mane mushroom, which has actually been shown scientifically to increase neural connections in the brain, which improves memory and cognition and problem solving. Sage, which has been shown to help focus, keep your brain focused rather than all over the place. It's like that. And then ginkgo leaf, which has been shown to increase the blood flow to the brain, so you're bringing more oxygen and more glucose to the brain, because that's what the fuels the brain. The oxygen and the glucose is what it burns to do all the thinking. If you've ever spent a lot of time like studying for a test or after taking a test and you are just wiped out, it's because you've worked your brain just like another muscle. So we got the brain pill. I got one for the liver. Got an immune system, kidneys, kidney stones. Right now, 7 different products, all based on traditional ancient plants that we evolved with to care for ourselves, that also have the scientific proof behind them that they actually do something. So I'm pretty happy right now with my life.
That's pretty cool.
I get to live my dream. How many people get to say that? I get to be a medicine man, using ancient plants to take care of people.
Yeah, actually, the brain pill. It's funny that you mentioned that. My boyfriend is studying for his aircraft mechanic tests right now, and I gave him some alpha brain, which is like it's the same thing as that. Well, probably different.
Okay, so the alpha brain, it has a few natural stuff, but it also has a lot of synthetic chemicals in it.
Okay.
Oh.
I mean, I figured, usually the most popular one isn't always the best one.
Hey,
But it's working. But
yeah, I mean, it's for a lot of people, it works. Yeah. I like, if you think about it, the human race, if you look at Homo sapiens, we've been around for about 83,000 generations. So during most of that, we were using the plants and the mushrooms as our medicine. And so evolution, survival of the fittest, those that responded best to these plants and mushrooms were generally going to be the healthiest. We're going to be the ones passing on their genes. And so in a way, we are genetically set up. I'm a chemist, not an English major, pre-set up to actually benefit from these plants and mushrooms.
So,
I know we're supposed to talk about food. We can switch over to food anytime you want.
no,
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. This is cool.
Oh,
I mean, plants are food, so you eat them, so it
yeah,
counts.
yeah,
Even if you're eating them to feel better, you're still
yeah.
eating them. Which also, it makes you can make medicine taste better. So there you go.
This is true.
I grow so much sage in my garden that
Ooh.
I'm excited that, you know.
Yeah. Before the brain pill, I used to take a bit of sage and put it in my coffee every morning. When you make the coffee, mix it in with the coffee grounds and take it that way. And it really helped just stay focused for a large part of the day. Put about 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1/4 of a teaspoon in there.
Well, you'd have to dry it out?
Yeah. So you take the dried sage. Ooh, you should air dry it, not dehydrate it, right?
I mean, I didn't dry it anyway, but
Uh-huh. Okay.
Why?
So tip to the listeners: if you are using herbs medicinally, you want to air dry them. Just tap your inner witch and have your house looking like you have. Well, you won't be looking like you have plants hanging everywhere, because you will have plants hanging everywhere. When a plant dies, the last thing it does is trigger an enzyme whose purpose is to chew through that cell wall. If you remember, plants have a hard, rigid cell wall. Do you ever freeze green beans or peas or anything like that by chance?
no, because it goes soggy.
No, well, yeah, because if you have to blanch them first.
Yeah.
So if to properly freeze a green bean, you stick it in boiling water for 30 seconds and then ice it down and then freeze it. The reason you stick it in the boiling water is to screw up that enzyme that wants to chew apart the cell wall. So if you don't do that, it turns soggy. In the case of medicinal plants, you want those holes to form in the cell walls. So then when you take the dried plant and put it in your water or your whiskey or your vodka or whatever, now there are escape routes for the chemicals that were trapped inside to get out.
Okay.
The other thing it does is it helps break down the chlorophyll, which has some health benefits, but it also tastes bad. So you get the magnesium that's in the chlorophyll, but you don't get the chlorophyll flavor. If you take the sage, fresh sage or fresh mint to add to a drink and you just chop it up and mash it up, you're going to get the sage flavors, but you're also going to get chlorophyll and some other kind of off flavors. But if you let the plant dry naturally, get those holes in it, and then crush it up and use it as a seasoning or a spice or a tea, you'll find the flavor is much better.
Now, is there like a specific temperature that because in Florida, one of the problems I have when I'm trying to dry things out is that it's humid. So things like to get moldy.
Yeah, same here in Houston, Texas, where I'm at.
So if you were going to dehydrate it, is there a temperature?
Okay, lowest possible. Yeah, if you do want to do that. My personal preference is still hanging it in loose bundles and have a fan blowing on it so there's air constantly moving over it. And then someplace in an air-conditioned room of your house. You don't want to do it in the garage or the attic or someplace like that because, it will mold and mildew and get nasty. But otherwise, just the lowest setting that the dehydrator will go at.
Cool.
I don't know if you can hear right now, but there's a major thunderstorm going overhead. So, okay, good. I have a good microphone here.
Professional setup over there.
I do these a lot, yeah. So, we had power flicker like a half hour before the start. It's like, oh, please.
It's hard. Anyway, so oil industry.
Medicine man. Yeah.
The moon.
The moon. Yep. I'm still working with the moon. They got this thing called the Plant the Moon and Plant Mars Challenge too, where you can get synthetic lunar soil and synthetic Mars soil and then try and grow plants in them. And you can modify it up to 50%. You can replace about 50% of the soil with something else to try and make it more plant friendly. And so I'm trying to grow some wild plants, in particular some wild onions, because wild onions are loaded with vitamin C and they're very flavorful. One of the problems astronauts have in low gravity situations is their sinuses don't drain. So it's like their sinuses are constantly swelled, which shuts down their sense of taste. And so they want really strong flavored foods, and onions, really strong flavored foods and loaded with vitamin C. So it seemed like a good thing. Unfortunately, it hasn't been growing, so I'm not sure what to do. But that's science. Not everything works.
Well, also, wouldn't the problem be like, if there's no gravity, how does the plant know which way is up, you know?
That is a real big problem. At least on the moon, there is some gravity, but for the Mars trip, yeah, the plants they get really confused. Their roots don't know where to go. Their stems don't know how to grow. But one of the biggest issues, and we haven't figured out why, so plants have an immune system. They have a system in them designed to prevent bacteria and viruses and stuff taking over. For some reason, one of the side effects of growing in 0G is the plant's immune system shuts down and it's easily attacked and killed by just general bacteria or even plant viruses. So that, like NASA, they try and sterilize everything, but you can't sterilize everything. So there's bacteria on the space station. If you read about it, they have a big problem with mildew on the space station because it's all canned air and kept out of constant humidity. And so they're constantly fighting mildew. That's affecting the plants because, like I said, in zero gravity, the plants get really confused and they just go, I don't like this. And when you get a depressed plant, it gets sick just like a person does. So, yeah.
That's really interesting because, plants have feelings too, guys.
We could talk about that if you'd like. No, they've shown that, like in a garden, if one particular plant is being attacked by a caterpillar or something, it releases chemical pheromones that say, hey, I'm being attacked. And all the other plants, not just the same species, but all the other plants around it can pick those chemical pheromones up. And then usually they respond by increasing different, bittering agents or other things that bugs don't like to eat. So they actually communicate that way, and not just between members of the same species, but across the different plant species, warning each other something's eating me and things like that. So
I always think just because, recently there's been a lot of discussion about mushrooms and psilocybin and all that other stuff. And I just think just because, even bees, right? Bees can see different wavelengths than we can.
correct. Yeah. Ultraviolet and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can't, just because we can't do it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent or they're not communicating.
That is a very wise way to think about things. Most definitely.
Just because I don't speak French, but it doesn't mean that they're not communicating with each other.
Exactly. Oh, I'm going to steal that analogy. That was a great one. I'll give you credit, but yeah, yeah, the plants speak French. It's what's going on. Chemical French.
But you can't hear them, or you can't, you can't see it either. So we're just dumb plants.
But if you lock them in a chamber and extract the air from in there and analyze the air, you will find these pheromones that they're releasing. That's how chemists do it. We don't take all the air out. We just take a little bit. So
just a sample.
We don't need much anymore to analyze things.
Yeah, that's cool technology.
Mm-hmm.
So have you written books on this kind of stuff too, or just the foraging?
No, mainly just presentations and talks. What is it, in end of August? Yeah, I'm talking at the the Worldwide Mensa Convention about ancient astronauts, or my work trying to get ancient plants in space for the astronauts. But ancient astronauts, that kind of ties in with the History Channel and Discovery Channel, all that stuff there. Aliens, yeah. But in this case, it's not aliens, it's plants, old plants, because they've been doing a lot of work on growing plants in space. They have some really cool technology. The plants don't like it. We already talked about the low gravity, but a lot of the domesticated plants require a lot more time than NASA expected from the astronauts to keep them healthy. And so one of the hopes is maybe going to wild plants who generally don't need care, even on Earth. They would require less time with the astronauts in space. So there's quite a few really nutritious wild plants that should grow in the conditions. I'm about to dump the wild onions and start up wild violets because they are loaded with vitamin A and vitamin C, which are two crucial things you need as a spacefarer.
And I don't know if you've ever had any violet flavored candy before, but it's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my
Most
favorite
definitely.
edible flowers.
Yes, totally.
Which they actually love in France. But
I like a lot of the French foods, the snails, things like that. They're good stuff.
They're good stuff. So the foraging in this book is not just the stuff that is in your area.
Right.
So how did you travel the country or?
Okay. I grew up in Minnesota. I spent 3 years in South Dakota. I spent 7 years in New York before moving to Texas. But here's the thing. The publisher requested that the plants be available and easy to find for everyone across North America. So I looked around at the plants available in Texas and that were also available elsewhere and went, let's just put those in the book. So yeah, they didn't fly me anywhere. I did have some friends send me some pictures, better pictures than I had of plants. And when I was up in Minnesota, visiting my folks in the summer, got some pictures there. But the thing to remember about plants is they don't follow geographic boundaries. They follow ecological boundaries. They're interested in what is the soil like, how much rain am I getting, and what is the overall temperature. One of the big things that still to this day, after 23 years of living in Texas, I still have a plant calendar based on Minnesota. The summertime edible plants of Minnesota are wintertime plants down in Texas.
Yep.
Because there's that change there. And so I get confused because there's like Christmas stuff going on, but there's chickweed and there's dandelions and there's bittercress. And these are summertime plants, even after 20 some years, what you grew up as a child. That's what
I'm from New Jersey and I have the same, I keep still try to grow tomatoes in the Florida summer. Not a good idea.
Don't do that. Yeah. So yeah, it was just a matter, it's not so much the state or Canadian province. It is what is the particular ecosystem. And if you look in the back of the book, I don't know if you got there, there's actually a calendar for all the plants that shows, okay, if you're in the southern part of North America, look for these plants between these months. If you're in the central part of North America, look there. Yeah, there we go. And if you're in the northern part, this is something that most foraging books don't have. That was, when I wrote this, I bought pretty much every foraging book out there and studied them to see basically what sucks about, can I say that, about these foraging books. And one of them was they were very localized, even though they said, international or North America, the time frames that they were giving for the plants was wrong for a large part of North America. It was, correct for that little swatch, but not the whole North America. So that was one thing that was very important to me, that we include this calendar in there so people can find that, they know when to look for it.
I mean, one of the things I really liked too were these drawings you have of like the shapes and what they're called of the leaves and just parts of plants, because I think learning the kind of like jargon that goes along with the foraging is probably very important, especially when it comes to not getting poisoned.
Yeah. Well, I tell people in my classes, when you are looking at a plant and trying to figure out what it is, you want to match up at least 5 structural features of that plant with whatever resource guide you're using to identify the plant. And that can be like, what is the shape of the edge of the leaf like? Are there hairs on the leaf or not? Are there hairs on the bark? How are the leaves arranged? How are the berries arranged? How many petals are in the flower? There's dozens of different structural features, but you want to match at least 5. And then with mushrooms, it's more like 8 to 10 structural features. And a lot of people don't even realize there's 8 to 10 structural features on a mushroom. Well, there's a lot more, but you got to look closely.
Yeah, I almost, when I was a kid, I still ate things that I wasn't supposed to eat. But I remember there were mushrooms growing on my friend's lawn, and I went, like, I picked one up and I was like, I brought it to her mom and I was like, look what I found, like, let's eat it. And then she was like, she like swatted it out of my hand. She's like, you can't eat that, that's poisonous.
Yeah, and if it was growing on a urban or suburban yard, it was either the green vomiter, the death cap, or the destroying angel. None of those are good to eat.
It looked like a big white, like those white baby bellas you get, but like really big.
Do you remember if there were like brown spotches on the top?
It was white. It was like bright white.
Do you remember if the gills were also white?
No, they were
they were brown.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the one. It might have been a horse mushroom. What the hell is the name of it? I can't remember the scientific name. But that is, some of them are edible. One of the ways the gills, when the mushroom is young and still kind of more like a ball, like the white button mushrooms you get, the gills will be pink, but then as it opens up, the gills turn dark brown. And then you can do what's called a spore print, where you take the cap, set it on a piece of glass, let it sit there overnight. The spores, the reproductive seeds, if you will, drop from the cap, and then the color of those spores is another one of the 8 to 10 structural features you use to identify the mushroom. And then if you really want to get into it, you look at the spores under a microscope, because the shape of the spore is also a possible thing. But usually you can get there before the spore print.
Before the microscope.
Everyone should have a microscope. They're fun. Sometimes they're scary.
When I was little. Cool. It was, and it had a mirror on the bottom.
Yep, to reflect the light.
Like cast iron. Yeah.
That's a good one there, actually.
I don't know what happened to it. Probably,
your parents probably threw it out. Yeah.
Maybe my mom has it. She's one of those people that hoards everything. But she's, I think it was her microscope when she was a kid.
Oh,
she
cool.
Was, she wanted to be a nurse practitioner, so yeah.
Neat.
But anyway.
All right, I'm having fun. Next question.
So, have you ever accidentally poisoned yourself?
I love this question because I get to. So, I have never directly poisoned myself with a plant or mushroom. The one incident I had involved grasshoppers. So, Buddy and I, we were on a canoe trip, and we put ashore for a bit, and there were these big, slow-moving grasshoppers on the ground, and like locust and wild honey in the Bible and so forth. A lot of cultures eat grasshoppers and crickets. I worked with an Indian lady from India who lamented that she really didn't like going to movies here because they did not serve roasted crickets, and that was one of her favorite childhood memories. And so we had been talking about eating bugs, and there were these big grasshoppers, and they were really easy to cook, and you skewer them and roast them, and they tasted like steak. They were really, really good.
I think shrimp, like
crunchy steak, like the crusty part. Oh, I mean, if you roast them long enough, they weren't juicy. They weren't juicy.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and one of the things, generally, when you are eating bugs, which most of the world does, you do have to cook them thoroughly because most bugs will carry tapeworms. So, cooked it thoroughly.
Bugs have bugs, is what you're telling me?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. Okay, but it wasn't a tapeworm. In retrospect, it should have been obvious, but these grasshoppers, these big, slow-moving, easy to capture, really tasty grasshoppers were very brightly colored. Frankly, they look like a cross between a monarch butterfly and a grasshopper. Bright red and black and yellow.
Okay.
Their main source of food is poison ivy.
Oh no!
Yeah. So, poison ivy. Luckily, the mucous membrane of the stomach protected most of it, but not all of it. And so, yeah, I learned the lesson. That's when I spent a little more time putting due diligence into edible bugs as much as edible plants and mushrooms. So, yeah, to avoid that mistake again.
My tongue is getting itchy just thinking about it.
Yep.
What? Oh my God, that's so great.
Laying it out there. Ask me anything.
What other bugs have you eaten?
Oh, so June bugs are really good. Here in Texas, we have these little wood scorpions, and you toast them up, and they taste like a mixture of shrimp and good cheese. So they're a real favorite of mine when I'm out there. You get a ultraviolet light. You can get the little flashlights, and they glow in the dark. They fluoresce in the ultraviolet light, I mean, and they're really easy to spot at night in the woods. I spent a fair amount of time in China, and there they eat everything that casts a shadow, basically. And so I had a great time just going to the different stalls and going, that looks like an interesting thing. Can I eat that? And, you know, like scorpions on a stick. And these, the one thing, they had this thing called sandworms that look like a giant earthworm. I mean, we're talking 2-3 feet long and, you know, a quarter, maybe even a half-inch thick. And they pickled those, and I only ate one of those because I didn't really care for the flavor of that. So yeah, the pickled earthworm sort of thing's not so good, but everything else is really good.
Seems
You know, there's
like
seasonings. And
like a rubbery texture.
Rubbery and juicy and sour. You know, now that I think about it, you know, the giant gummy worms? Kind of like that, but without the sugary.
Ooh.
Kind of.
Uh,
Yeah, kind of like rubbing one of those, take the sugar off, rub it in some dirt, away you go.
sounds like. I heard some ants taste like lemons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And do you have fire ants in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you've ever dug up a fire ant nest, but they have the little white grubs, the little, you know, white eggs. Those are quite tasty. The fire ants themselves don't eat because they're loaded with formic acid, which is painful. But the little grubs, yeah, are edible. And then around here, we have the leafcutter ants, which are still in Mexico are considered good food. Those are fine. The black carpenter ants are okay. You know, kind of pop them like popcorn and just eat them crunchy style. So, but yeah, the scorpion, if I had to pick one, it'd definitely be the scorpions would be my favorite. Though June bugs are pretty good too.
What do June bugs taste like?
Peanuts. So yeah, you take them and well, I want to try it in a hot air popcorn popper, but my wife heard me say that and she hid the popcorn popper. But yeah, use a nonstick pan with no grease, because if you put any oil or anything, they get oily. And just drop the June bugs in there and kind of stir them around, and they actually just kind of pop. They don't like turn inside out like popcorn, but they kind of pop up. At that point, they're done. Then you just take the wings off, the head off, and the legs, and what you have is a little nugget of protein that tastes like meat, like a peanut. These are a staple food of the Native Americans across there. It was food. It was protein.
I mean, so much of our, history, we've ate bugs. So it's just like, it's interesting that we've kind of totally moved away from that.
Here's the thing. You're still eating bugs. If you look at the FDA or USDA, FDA regulations on how much bug parts are allowed in processed food, you start to go, whoa, that's a lot more than I thought they'd let in there.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you may as well get them straight from nature.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about it because I've heard there's a correlation between having shellfish allergies and having cockroach allergies. And I'm not sure what else that would apply to.
Yeah. Well, if you think shrimp is an insect.
Exactly. Just under the water.
Yep. So shrimp and crawfish, if you're allergic to that, you probably don't want to eat giant water beetles or June bugs or anything like that either. Probably not even scorpions. Maybe scorpion. You might be able to try one scorpion first just to see. You can order them from Amazon, like, dried scorpions.
Yeah, I think you got to go fresh if you're gonna go at all.
Just remember, you want to take the last joint of their tail off where the stinger and the poison sac is.
That's a
You don't
good.
want
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, you know the paper wasps, the ones that form the nest, not the globe shape, but the flat type. Do you have those in
that like
Florida?
stick to the wall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The little larvae in there are pretty tasty too. Like drop them in cup of soup, pretty good.
Cup of soup.
Yeah, no one stole my lunches after like the second year at work.
I believe it. Does your wife eat bugs too?
No. Okay, so no, she doesn't. Yeah, we'll just
She does. Only the
no,
FDA. No.
she hates cooking. She loves the fact that I do most of the cooking. And she early on, don't ask, don't tell sort of rules in the house. Just eat it. It tastes good, fine. Everything's good. It's when she hears about plans to use the popcorn popper to try and pop June bugs that way, she gets, okay, then I would know about it. You let me know. No, I didn't know you were in the other room listening to me talk this plan over. So
She's probably in the next room right now. What do you mean?
I'm safe. She's in New York City tonight, so I'm good.
So, foraging.
It's a popular subject.
Yeah, it is a popular subject now, which is great.
Yeah, especially with shows.
When you were in China, did you go foraging at all? Or?
No, so China, if you're a Westerner in China, you're not allowed to do a whole lot.
That's true.
Yeah, and like even the whole idea of going out hiking or camping or something like that, it's from what I could tell from the time I was there and discussing with people, that's not anyone there does. It's like, why would you want to sleep under a tree? Well, it worked for Buddha, but in general, it's not high on their list. Now, what's really fascinating about there is all the landscaping in the cities was gardening, was plants. So, I mean, they didn't have just decorative stuff for the most part. There is occasionally, but all the little street medians, all the roofs were all loaded with gardens. So they were, when you got that many billion people, and quite frankly, not a real, lot of high quality farmland, you do a lot of raised bed gardening. You do a lot of, just any space that doesn't have a person or a building on it now has food growing in it. So
I always think about that in America because especially like along the highways and like these freaking, like even I walk out my door, there's like a patch of grass between like,
the sidewalk and the street. Oh yeah.
Or either direction of traffic. And I'm like, why is this grass, or why is it some type of tree or something that doesn't have any fruit?
Yep.
And they always say pest control. And I'm like, well, you pay people to clean up the, like the palms that fall down. You could have people that pick up the fruit or whatever and bring it to the
or just say fair game. Yeah, it was actually kind of cool. That's one thing Houston is really good at, is they have landscaped with a lot of fruit trees. Like I was driving down this one street today, and I noticed it down that center median. It was filled with wild plum trees, but they were placed there. They weren't wild in the sense that they just showed up. Someone had planted them there. And there seems to be more and more. There's a couple of cities in Houston that have created food gardens, basically city parks loaded with fruit trees and edible vine, plants, dewberries, blackberries, maypops, that sort of thing, where people can then go and harvest. One of the issues with something like that is twofold. There's some liability issues. If someone eats something and gets sick, who gets sued? And like anywhere else, there are vandals who, just for the sake of destroying, they tear stuff up, which sucks. Are two big things. And then also, I don't know if you're from economics class, the tragedy of the commons, where if you have a resource that everyone is free to take from, some people will quickly realize, if I grab all of it, then I can profit from it. So you got the problem with people like taking all the plums and then selling the plums or making jelly jam and selling that because there are no rules on harvesting it. When you think about wild game, deer, fish, ducks, there are limits to how much you can take, and it's controlled. There aren't things like that on plants. And so that's become a big problem in the foraging world, that plant rustling is becoming a big problem, especially in places like New York City and Los Angeles, where fancy restaurants want to serve wild plants, and they will pay whoever shows up with a bag of them at the back door for these plants. So it's become kind of an unregulated Wild West plant rustling sort of thing going on.
That's interesting. Because the top restaurants are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They're charging a lot of money for it.
Mm-hmm. Now, some are ethical about it. Some have farm property out, somewhere, and they're getting it from there, but not all of them.
Well, some of these, they can't really, can they be farms? Like a lot of this mushroom stuff.
A lot of the mushrooms, no, in particular. Some can. A lot of them can, but there are some real, like morel mushrooms. They don't respond. Yeah, we have not figured out how to make them grow. Some of the puffballs. North America actually has some really excellent truffles that quality-wise are on par with the French truffles. Here in Texas, we have several. But again, they have not found any way to make them grow on demand. They just have to appear naturally. So, yeah, if you look up like Texas truffles, they command just about the same price as the French truffles.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So there's a lot of work going into trying to domesticate the Texas truffles to see if we can figure out what are the secret ingredients that needs to be in the soil. And they grow symbiotically with pecan trees. So you need something with the pecan trees and something else for these truffle spores to grow into big enough to eat truffles. A lot of science. Ginseng is another thing like that, going to the medicinal plants. For ginseng is being stripped from the wild. So when I formulate, one thing I don't use is ginseng, because a lot of the ginseng, they got a TV show about it. They got, the Appalachia Outlaws or something like that, which is about ginseng hunters and, how bloodthirsty they are on collecting the ginseng.
So I know ginseng is, I think of ginseng, I think of green tea with ginseng, but what kind of plant? I've never actually seen the plant before. Now I'm thinking about
it's a small, slow do you know, I was going to say like a green dragon, but you wouldn't know that plant. Maypop. Oh, okay. Do you watch Harry Potter movies?
I'm 30, so I've read
that doesn't mean anything. You're probably too young for them.
No, I was
the Mandrake.
At that age. A Mandrake.
Yeah, so kind of like a Mandrake.
Oh my god, but not as loud.
No. Doesn't scream. Usually the person screaming is a person who discovers it, and then they quickly shut up because they don't want anyone else to know what they found.
So it's like a tuber then.
Yeah, it's a thick root underground. So it's a short plant with just a few leaves, not very tall, but it takes like 5, 6, 7 years to grow a tuber appreciable, or a root appreciable, big enough to harvest. So.
Is there a way to harvest it where it would grow back?
No, because you need the whole root.
You need the whole root?
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah. I know there are a few places they are trying to mimic. It's an understory plant, so it doesn't like full sun. It needs to be surrounded by certain other plants and always in the shade and a certain amount of drainage. And when we talked about ecosystems, plants go where the ecosystem is. The ecosystem for the ginseng is actually very, very limited. And so recreating that ecosystem in a greenhouse has not been very successful.
So not bringing it to the space station.
Nope.
Interesting. So back to the space station because I forgot my other question.
Okay.
So would like something shorter, like a moss or something, be something?
Yeah. So the growth chamber, it is 18 inches tall by 14 inches by 14 inches, and then a 4-inch layer of soil. So you got 4 inches of soil, 18 inches above it, 14 inches on either side, sort of thing. And then it has automatic lights and watering. So yeah, you need short plants. You can't do corn. You can't even do things like green beans or other trailing viney things. You need small things. That's why one of the things they do a lot with, it's a small mustard plant. Well, because they use this one particular mustard plant because it does not get very big. The genetics of it have been very thoroughly analyzed. And so when they do before and after genetic analysis, they can really see not only what genes may have changed or been affected or turned on or off, but also what those particular genes actually do in the plant. They really, really, really know this plant very well. Other things that grow, things like radishes has been a popular thing. Some spinach or lettuce, usually lettuce. The problem with spinach in space is spinach has oxalates in it. You might have heard that somewhere, oxalate. And the problem with oxalates is they like to bind to calcium and then take it out of the blood.
Oh.
When you're in a weightless environment, your bones lose density because they don't have to fight against gravity. And so they really start to decay and crumble. So osteoporosis is a problem with astronauts. And so plants that have oxalates in them are another one that they don't want because that accelerates the decomposition of their bones. So yeah, that's bad. You don't want, jellyfish astronauts trapped in space forever because they can't do, gravity anymore. And they figure it'll take about a year to get from Earth to Mars, somewhere 9 months to a year. But this bone weakening thing happens in like 6 weeks. So
yeah, that's why they have to work out so much all the time too, with the strength training and whatnot.
Yeah. Another really interesting thing that happens to them is the shapes of their eyes change. Because think, the eye, it's a jellyfish inside your head. It's, a fluid-filled membrane. It is responding to gravity. So when you don't have the gravity, it changes shape, which screws up your vision because now your lens, the distance between the lens and the back of your eye has changed. And so there are certain plants that help, I don't want to say stiffen the eye, but reduce the eye's susceptibility to changing shape that way. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Giving them the plants to maintain the shape of their eyes. Who would have thought, the eyes changed? Suddenly the glasses they had no longer work in space because the shape of their eye has changed because they don't have the gravity. So
You
little things
need
like
your
that.
space prescription and your Earth prescription.
Exactly. So for third world countries, they make these glasses that have little adjustable lenses. And so you can, as like in this case, it'd be as a child grows and the prescription changes, they can turn the screws and refocus. And so I think that's probably what we're going to have to do, unless we get the particular plant set up right that help with that. But
I would think too that they would want to focus on a plant that is like high in calories, like a potato or something.
Yes. And that's one of the problems with foraging, that calories are actually hard to come by from plants. You're right. Tubers such as potatoes, also the seeds and the nuts are where you find the high density calories in plants. So the tubers, the seeds, the nuts, the reproductive seed of the plants, because they've stored energy in there that the plant will then use until it can do photosynthesis. But to get enough seeds to do anything useful, you're not going to be able to have a wheat field in your spacecraft. So calories are a problem. Now they can do maybe some genetically modified beets, the sugar beets, and that maybe they increase even more sugar. That might work. But a potato plant, they don't have the space to grow enough potatoes to make a difference. So they need to have high density carb and then get their vitamins and some minerals and things like that, and all the other unsung heroes of nutrition. If you look at a package that has, all the different nutrients that may be in it. But if you think about it, if you limited yourself just to those nutrients listed by the FDA as the dietary needs, you're not going to be a healthy person. You need other stuff. You can't just take a pill with, this much vitamin A, this much vitamin C, this much phosphorus. You need all these other things too. They just haven't studied them enough to figure out how much and, that sort of thing. So the plants will supply that. All those, I will use the term unknown nutrients that we know we need. We just don't know enough about them, what we need.
Well, also, a lot of it isn't just how much of something you need too, but it's the delivery system of how you get it.
Yep. The bioavailability plays a huge role in things, especially with vitamins and minerals. That's one of the problems with a lot of vitamins. You're basically just making really expensive pee because it's just going right through because the body can't absorb it. You might get a little bit, but yeah. So
I was
all that
working as a flight attendant, and flight attendants, rightly so, we're like germaphobes, and
yeah, understandable. Even before all this, yeah.
Yeah, even before all this, and anytime anyone, like if you like sniffled, they would come at you with the emergency powder or something like that, and I'd be like, guys, like you're gonna. They're like, well, it's like 1,000 so and so. But I'm like, yeah, but you're gonna pee all of it out, and they'd be like, what? And I'd be like,
yeah, no, I know it. The last time I was in China, I landed during the height of the SARS thing, and they basically sprayed us down with something. I don't know what it is, but before we got off the plane, they had to, come with the sprayers and coat us. And
so that I remembered my question. So as someone who's just going to start foraging, what do you recommend would be the easiest thing?
Okay. Go out your front door or your back door, wherever there are more plants, and look at the trees. And then identify the trees that are around you. Start with the big trees that are around you. A lot of people, they'll grab a book, like my book, Foraging, Peterson's Guide to Wild Edibles, and they will go out in the woods and say, I'm going to find wild edible plants. And they look at the sea of green, and they look at the book, and they look at the sea of green, and they look at the book. And then they go back home and, spend time on YouTube watching cat videos because it's too hard. They're going about it the wrong way. You need to identify the plant first and then look up to see if it's edible. And start with the plants that are around you. I recommend starting with the trees because usually trees are very easy to identify. Especially nowadays with the different plant identification apps, they're not good enough to trust to eat, but at least put you on the right path, especially for big things like trees. So, okay, Snap, what is this? And it looks at the leaf and says, oh, that's an elm tree. And then you look up some, like in your edible plant guide and compare, find 5 different structural features and say, okay, yep, this is an elm tree. What are its edible uses? And then you go from there. Either again, go to Google or DuckDuckGo and type in elm tree edible medicinal and see what information pops up. With your, after you've figured out all the trees around your yard, your neighbor's yard, the park, then you start looking at the landscaping plants, especially the bushes, and figure out, okay, what bushes do I have here? What bushes do my neighbors have? Usually either it'll be some gardening person in the neighborhood that can help you, or worst case worst, you take a picture of it, you go to the local nursery and say, what is this plant? And then, oh, that's Elaeagnus. And you go home, you DuckDuckGo Elaeagnus, edible medicinal, and see what's there. So you identify the plants that are around you. And after you've done the trees and the bushes, then you've started to develop the skills you need for plant identification to tackle the weeds. Now, again, going back to the apps, I found them to be maybe 50-50 as far as identifying weeds. It really depends on where the developers are. Surprisingly enough, one of the more accurate weed identification apps I found is the one put up by Monsanto to help you figure out what particular poison of theirs you should spray to kill the plant.
Of course. Well, I'm
Forks,
sure they
not
had a ton
poison.
of money to develop that.
Yeah. So, that's another thing. But then you identify the weeds. And by then you've realized, wow, 60% of the stuff around me is actually food. And you have those early wins you need to keep at something. If you go out and you can't find anything after the first try, you're not going to go back out there. But if you spend an afternoon and you go, wow, I got this and I got this and I got this and I got this and it's edible, what else is out there? It's like, when they know when you go to Vegas, if you've not on the cameras before, they see a strange person come in, you sit down at a jackpot, the one-armed bandit slot machine, and they will tell it to win for you, to hook you, give you that instant, $5. Here, you won $5. And now you're thinking, this is great. And then you're hooked. And every so often they'll give you, another small win to keep you hooked. So in this case, you're harnessing your own body's natural dopamine reward system to develop a useful skill, and much quicker than if you were just trying to find a particular plant from a book. So yeah, trees, landscaping plants, weeds, identify those, and then you'll be set and you can go off and learn the others.
Like down here, the first thing that I identified, well, I didn't identify my neighbor is a plant person, I guess. It was actually really cool when I started my garden on my patio. I didn't know any of my neighbors. And a lot of that has to do with being, before the pandemic, I was never home because I was a flight attendant. And then I started this garden, and this one lady, she just came by and she gave me a tree.
Plant people will do that.
She's like, here, you have better sun over here. Here's a tree.
I love that. Yep.
And so she came by the other day. Perfect. Thought it was going to take me forever to find it. And she got this from the parking lot, and she was like, you can eat this.
Personally, and I kind of suspected that was the one you were going to pull up, because this is one of the most prevalent hot weather growing out of the sidewalk in the driveway cracks sort of thing. And it's absolutely delicious. And along with assorted vitamins and minerals, it is loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, which normally you only get from animal sources. It's one of the few vegetable vegan sources of the omega-3 fatty acids, which are really important, not just for the heart, but also the brain.
So it's purslane and avocado salad.
There you go.
But my question with that was, I was afraid to eat it. I believed her that it was edible, but I was afraid because I don't know if my complex sprays anything. So what would be some advice for
Great question. Because that is a concern. What has been sprayed, what has been spread, what sort of chemicals? From the herbicide, they are slightly less dangerous than the pesticides. But if the plants look healthy, if the purslane is looking healthy, it probably hasn't been sprayed with a pesticide, with an herbicide. If it had been sprayed with an herbicide, it wouldn't be there. So if you see the weeds, that's a sign there hasn't been the herbicides for the most part. The pesticides are a little trickier, especially fire ant killer. The fire ant killer, it's actually quite poisonous to people too. Looking at the molecules, it's actually basically a modified chemical warfare agent. The rule of thumb with the pesticides is whatever the active lifespan it says on the package, like Andro once a year fire ant killer. You got to double that before you can really feel safe that nothing has been taken up by the plants. So if it's a once a year fire ant killer, you got to probably wait 2 years. So this would be something where you would need to talk to the property owners and find out, hey, what have you been putting down? And maybe not putting it here for me. Maybe cool.
I don't have that kind of relationship.
Oh, come on. You said you're a Jersey girl. You can force yourself upon them.
Yeah, they love that.
Hey, I went to school, I did 7 years in upstate New York at college there. Yeah, the Jersey girl. Yeah, you don't mess with them. They get their way. It's like, you know
I
what?
mean, it was hard enough getting my way with my plants on my patio.
So you already have a win.
Yep, but I don't think they want to give me another one.
No
But
harm in asking over and over and over.
the so the seeds from that purslane, would they also be infected with? Or,
Okay, so no, the seeds would be okay. And one of the really cool things about purslane, and a lot of gardeners don't realize that, if you know, it's a succulent, so it stores a lot of water in its stem and its leaves. It stores enough water in its stem and leaves that if you break it off and just set it in a pot somewhere, it has enough water in it to go through the whole flower and seed forming cycle, even if it doesn't have any roots in the soil. So one of the great ways of spreading it is, especially if you see it with flowers, if you can get it with the flowers or already seed, break it off, drop it in, you know, the flower pots, and away you go.
wow.
But even if there aren't flowers on it, you know, get the bigger, thicker ones, and well, the tips, the last ends. And here's another tip for people who are antisocial. If you take the purslane stems, if you look at it, you know, they're kind of this reddish color, kind of thick. You peel off the leaves and then pickle the stems. Use the pickled okra recipe from the Ball Book of Canning and Preserving. Pickled okra, real easy. It looks like you pickled earthworms. And so when you're invited to a potluck or something like that, you show up with a thing of pickled earthworms and they will never ask you to bring food or anything again, ever. So, you know, you serve it to a relative that's visiting or someone you don't like. But
That just
really
sounds
tasty.
like a great Halloween food.
Yep. Oh, and in well, it's in there too. The betony. Look up betony, and then look at the tuber associated with the betony. 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 So, yeah, it's kind of hard to see here. Yeah, you got the reflection on it, but the tubers, they kind of look like maggots.
Oh my
They have
God,
this
they
white.
do.
Yeah, so they have these white. So if you pickle those, especially if you put a little turmeric or a little curry powder in there, they turn this horrific yellowish color that really looks like some disease pickled maggot, which is another great Halloween treat to have at, you know, like the company Halloween party or something like that.
What does that taste like?
Pickles. The tubers themselves taste like really, really mild radishes. So if you've ever had like a pickled radish, that's
I
pretty
love
much what it
pickled
tastes like.
radishes.
There you go.
I can't. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. So it's a pretty common plant. It's going to be a wintertime plant around your area there.
And the flowers are
But-
pretty.
Yeah. It's in the mint family. It doesn't have a strong mint flavor, but it is, there's an old Italian saying with betony that if you have a cold, sell your coat and buy betony, because it has some really good upper respiratory soothing and expectorant, and, you know, helps with the immune system and all that sort of thing to help break a cold. So, but it also grows, it's a mint. So it grows somewhat invasively in the wild or in a garden. So it does really well in pots.
Yeah, I have some peppermint there, and
Yeah.
I've never done it. But that's the thing I don't like about, I love peppermint tea. That's like one of my favorite teas. But the peppermint down here, I don't know if it's like the conditions are too good for it, but it's like not minty enough.
Yeah. Give it some shade and stress it. Prune it, get it really bushy. So the pruning kind of mimics an insect attack. And we talked about how when the plant is being attacked, it starts releasing other chemicals. The peppermint, it is, among other things, antifungal. And it's one of the protective molecules. So if the plant thinks it's under attack, it generally increases the peppermint that it makes.
Can you hear the people screaming?
Yep.
Cut this part out. Bethany.
Yep. Good plant.
I'm gonna have to put like that thing on the screen where it's like, we're sorry to disrupt this broadcast. All right.
I'm having fun.
Yep. So, ooh, strawberries.
Ah,
Strawberries.
so I know you're looking at the Indian strawberries or the mock strawberries.
Indian strawberries. Yeah.
Okay, those are tasteless.
No.
Yes, yes,
They
but
got a
they
lot
are.
of seeds.
Yeah, but what you use them for is as decorations in really sweet desserts. So like cupcakes and cakes and sundaes and things like that, because they have an interesting crunch and because they have real no flavor, all the sweetness and all the other strong flavors override them. So you don't even realize they don't have much flavor. So you hide their kind of lack of flavor. But that red color is a class of chemicals called anthocyanidins, which are very, very potent antioxidants, which are really good for the body. And they're very prolific. The leaves and the flowers make a good vitamin C tea too.
I was really amazed when I like talk about like how marketing distorts our view of nutrition. How like like orange, like a bell pepper or probably even an onion has so much more vitamin C than an orange. And yet when you think
Mm-hmm.
vitamin C, you think oranges.
Yep, because you've been sold that bill of goods. And they are a good source of vitamin C. The problem with a lot of fruits is they've been bred to be very, very sweet. And so the sugar content and the calories is much higher than we're really designed to handle. If you think again at an evolutionary situation, we were looking for calories a lot. We needed calories. That was the big thing. It was hard to come. There wasn't a In-N-Out burger, Whataburger, or anything like that. You were hunting the calories. And so we evolved. If our stomach or even our mouths sensed sweetness, that was like, oh, there's calories here. Eat a lot of it because you don't know when the calories are going to be available again. So now with the fruit, the body knows it needs that vitamin C, but it's getting all this sugar to make it palatable to us because sugar releases the endorphins in the brain that's saying, this is a good thing you're doing right now. You should do this. You should eat this, a lot of this. And then we suffer for it. So.
Yep. And then food scientists go and make Doritos.
Yeah. So yeah, onions, peppers, leaves, pine needles, great sources of vitamin C.
Pine needles. Would that be short? Like that?
What?
That doesn't sound like something.
Okay, so pine needles. Pine needles, yeah, pound for pound, pine needles have more vitamin C in them than lemons and limes and oranges without the sugar.
But like,
okay.
Wouldn't that taste a little piney?
Well, okay, no. Well, a little, but it's good. So to get it, so the key thing when you're making pine needle tea is do not boil it. As vitamin C is temperature sensitive. Above 184 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts breaking apart. You lose about 10% of it per minute at 184 degrees. In chemistry, there's a thing called the Arrhenius equation, which is basically a rule of thumb. A chemical reaction doubles its speed at which it happens for every 10-degree increase in temperature. 10 degrees Celsius, but for every 10 degrees, the rate of the reaction doubles. So going from 184 degrees to 212 degrees, so water boils at 212 degrees, that's approximately a 10-degree increase, or a 10-degree Celsius increase in temperature. So the destructive rate, so instead of losing 10% of the vitamin C per minute, you're losing 20% of the vitamin C per minute. So if you're boiling it. So if you're making pine needle tea, you want the green pine needles. In this case, instead of letting them air dry, like we talked, tapping your inner witch, warlock sort of thing, you actually want to chop them up, mash them up, crush them up, rupture those cell walls, bring water to a boil, take it off the heat, let the water cool for 3 to 5 minutes, then put the pine needles in, let them soak 15 to 30 minutes, strain them out, and then, assuming it's cool enough to drink it. And it actually tastes the way, a lot of the air fresheners have that pine fragrance. And in light dilute situations, it's actually very pleasing. That's what the pine needle tea tastes like. But you need about 25 grams of pine needles, which isn't much really, to give a day's worth of vitamin C.
So since you're a food chemist, medical chemist, what
More
about,
like-
you're talking about a lot of teas. What about alcohol?
Okay, so you might have heard back in someplace, like dissolves like. So that's like vegetable oil does not dissolve in water because they are so molecularly different that they can't interact. They will just stay separated. Vitamin C is on the borderline. It's water soluble, but as you start increasing the alcohol content, it becomes less soluble. So if you're after the vitamin C, the plain water up to about 80, maybe 100 proof alcohol will help extract the vitamin C from the plant. And so you can make it that way. But if you go stronger than that in the alcohol, you may not actually extract all the vitamin C because it's no longer as soluble in the water alcohol mixture as it is in pure water, and even less soluble in pure alcohol. So you're going to have to match these things. So.
Are there any soluble things that are, because I mean, like gin, right? Like gin is basically flavored vodka with a bunch of potatoes.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of those are what are called esters, which is a molecule with an oxygen and another molecule kind of linked there, and then two more. Man, I wish I had a molecular model kit here. Oh well. But yeah, esters. So like banana candy is a prime example. That flavor, if you ever had like a banana flavored candy.
Oh, like the runts?
Yeah. Runts are a great example, but that has that banana flavor. That particular flavor is due to one molecule. It is a ester. So it has, shrubbery, linkage, shrubbery sort of thing. But that linkage with the oxygen here and oxygen there is a key component to it. But those are generally more soluble in alcohol than they are in water because.
So that's why I fucking hate that flavor. But that.
I'm sorry. I like it. Like a banana moon pie. Oh yeah. That's good.
I like bananas, but the flavoring, you know what I mean? Like I love like Nutella bananas in a crepe. Oh my God. But banana flavoring, it just, I think because my brain is like, this isn't bananas. Why are you trying to tell me this is bananas? But that would explain the Hefeweizens. Why I don't like them.
That makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, and the alcohol, it's basically the esters. But those are a lot of the molecules that are responsible for the fragrances and flavors of things. Like when you smell a flower, that fragrance, a lot of it is probably going to be different types of esters that you're smelling from a chemical point of view. And those are so hydrogen bonding, like we won't go there.
You can go there.
Okay. So imagine my fist is an oxygen atom.
Okay.
And then water is H2O. So if you have a hydrogen here and a hydrogen here, and this is the oxygen. So you have oxygen, hydrogen, hydrogen. Yep. Oxygen is an electronegative atom. It likes to grab electrons and draw them to it. So it takes the electrons from the hydrogen and kind of has it hanging on the oxygen. So what you end up with is, because the electrons have a negative charge, you get a negative charge on the oxygen and positive charges on the hydrogens. So if you have a negative charge, that's really attractive to a positive charge. So if you get another water molecule floating here, this oxygen will like to kind of hang out with this positive charge ion too. They won't be directly bonded. They're not sharing electrons, but because this one is missing it and this one has extras, it wants to go, well, I'm just going to hang out and vicariously live through your electrons. Okay. And so you got this going on. So you have a plus charge on the hydrogens, negative charge on the oxygen. Anything else, any other molecule that has lots of areas where it has kind of a positive charge and a negative charge, the water can then bind to and dissolve. So the way detergent works or soap works is you have generally what's called a polar head and a non-polar tail. So think a head with the positive and negatives and then this long tail that is just a bunch of carbons and hydrogens and has no charge. It's just a big, long, oily molecule. What that does is this oily molecule, you have oil, an oil stain, a greasy stain on your clothing or whatever, that oily tail digs into that oily stain because the oil part of the surfactant likes to be in the oil of the grease of the stain, and it goes in there, and now it buries itself to the point where all you have is this charged head on there. You have a bunch of these on there, and now the water goes, well, you're really cool, so we're going to lift you out, but it takes the entire package. It takes the surfactant with that greasy tail intertwined with the grease of the stain, lifts it out of the clothing. So now you have a ball of grease covered with these functional groups, to use a scientific term, that really like to bind to water. Normally the grease won't bind with water. It rejects water. But with that detergent in there, you have a long tail that likes to interact with the grease, but a head on that tail that likes to interact with water. So, and that's how it basically lifts it up and out, is it coats the grease or the stain with functional groups that will bind with the water. And now it can solubilize it.
Is that how, like, emulsifiers work? Like,
yes. Oh, yes. Again, you got the droplets of oil. Well, it depends if it's a water external or water internal emulsifier. Is the continuous layer water or oil? And then if it's the continuous layer is water, then yeah, in the oil part, you'll have the functional groups of something that likes to bind to water surrounding them. If it is a oil external where the continuous layer is oil and you have droplets of water suspended, now the functionalized heads are in that droplet of water with the long tails sticking out into the oil of the emulsion. So.
I always thought that was interesting because when you go into culinary school, one of the first emulsifiers you learn about is mustard. And you make like salad dressing,
Yeah, egg whites is another big one.
Yep.
So
it's
lecithin, from the egg whites.
Lecithin and egg yolk lecithin. Yep. Cool.
Very good stuff. That's what they're doing. They got both sides of the equation. They got the functionalized, I like water, and the long greasy, nah, not so keen on water sort of things going on. So
that's cool.
Now I'm hungry.
I got to.
Thinking a nice meringue pie would be good.
I actually got some peach cobbler in the fridge. But thank you for coming on the show. I have one question before you go.
Okay.
Is there anything that you should absolutely avoid eating at all costs?
Soy. Soy products. If you are concerned about estrogen mimics, like the whole big thing with the PBA plastics, they had the nonol polyphenols that were considered to be estrogen mimics. The estrogen mimic content of soy products is through the roof. So something to keep in mind. If you are trying to avoid excess estrogenic type things in your diet, I don't eat soy.
The one thing I was recently actually thinking about that because a friend of mine, she gets terrible migraines like once a month because her estrogen dips, during her menstrual cycle, because that happens to ladies a lot. So in that case, like, wouldn't you want to eat some soy?
In that case, probably, in that case. Mm-hmm. But for general day-to-day tofu every day sort of thing, not so good. Yeah.
I don't really eat that much, but I wondered if you ate. Is that
experiment on her?
Sorry?
Experiment on her. The price of friendship.
Oh, doctor. But if you, is that, it was, all the stuff with soy, is that from like what we did to soybeans or something?
No, no. It's just soy is really convenient. It grows really well. It requires some amount of fertilizer, but the yield per acre is very high, and it's just easily modified. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, when you think it's plants, it's natural, it's good for me. Well, no, not necessarily.
That's what I say. I say, well, arsenic comes from plants.
Yeah. Then I say cobra venom is extremely natural and organic. It's not so good for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I'm assuming you're talking domesticated. Even broccoli has some fairly high estrogenic type compounds. I love broccoli. It's a great way of getting like ranch dressing into my mouth. So,
you ever have a broccoli rabe with like a slow pork sandwich?
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm big into smoking meat, so yeah. Nice smoked pork shoulder. Ooh, I'll have to try that. Cabbage is good though, like smoked cabbage with the pork shoulder. That's really good.
The craziest smoked thing I ever had in my life was it was cold smoked, so it didn't lose its texture. It was a grape.
Yes. They're good. They're good.
Nobody told me that it was smoked. So I was like, what the?
Go for it. Yeah.
So thanks for coming on the show. Is there anything that I didn't get to that?
Oh, no, like I said, if you want to find me on the internet, so I have the medicinemanplantco.com where I'm doing the medicinal ancient plants for modern issues. And then also for the foraging side, the food side, it's foragingtexas.com. But keep in mind, because like I said at the beginning, the plants don't follow boundary areas. All the plants on the website have both a Texas map, county map, and a North American map by state and Canadian provinces. And so you can actually search by, location in the country, like Southeast or things. So Florida fans can find plants on there that are in Florida, California, Minnesota, wherever, Jersey. They can find the plants there. So it's, even though it says Foraging Texas in the title, I've realized there's no other website that, Green Dean's is pretty good. Green Dean has more plants on. He's actually there located in Florida. His website probably has more plants on it, but I think mine is more concise. I'm not much of a storyteller on the web. I'm more scientific-y. Like, here's the facts, bang, bang, bang. Here's a bunch of pictures, bang, bang, bang. This is what you look for. This is how you tell what it is. This is how you use it. Any other questions? Here's my email address. So, yeah.
So I would love to have you on again because I actually, I just thought you did the foraging stuff. I didn't see
the
medicine stuff.
Yeah.
So definitely gonna read
more
on that and get some questions. And I'd love to have you on when your new book comes out with a campfire cooking.
Yeah. That's supposed to be March of next year.
All right.
Tentatively March 21st. There you go. Yeah.
21st. You should
it's fun.
To the 25th. That was my birthday.
I think it comes out the 21st or 20 somewhere in the 20s of March next year. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Check out all the links. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts so far.
Oh,
cool. And I'll see you guys next time.